The moment Rowan Holt saw the woman in the wheelchair trying to reach a champagne flute that had been placed just slightly too high on the catering table, he didn't think twice. He crossed the room, picked up the glass, and handed it to her. That was it. That was the whole thing. He didn't make a show of it, didn't pause to see if anyone noticed, didn't offer a speech about inclusion or accessibility. He just handed her the glass and started to walk away. "You didn't ask if I even wanted it," she said. He stopped, turned around slowly. The woman was looking at him with dark eyes that carried something between amusement and suspicion, like she'd developed a reflex for spotting people who were only kind in public. Her hair was pulled back simply, and she wore a deep green dress that made her look like she had somewhere better to be than a Hospital Foundation gala in downtown Halifax. "Do you?" Rowan asked. She looked at the glass, then at him. "No. Actually, I hate champagne. Then we have something in common." He reached over and set the glass back on the table. "Rowan Holt. I know who you are," she said. "You designed the triage coordination software that 3 hospitals in Nova Scotia are using." He blinked. Most people at these events either recognized him vaguely from a LinkedIn photo or didn't recognize him at all. He preferred the latter. "And you are?" "Petra Vance." She didn't extend her hand right away, just held his gaze a moment longer than was comfortable. Then she did. "I'm on the Foundation's board, Accessibility Committee." He shook her hand. Her grip was firm and brief. "That explains why you're here," he said. "It explains why I'm anywhere near a room full of people who think a ramp at the back entrance counts as inclusion." She tilted her head toward the catering table. "They put everything at standing height, every year." Rowan looked at the table. She was right. Every platter, every glass, every little card describing the hors d'oeuvre, all placed for someone standing 5'8" or taller. "I'll say something to the coordinator," he said. "Don't," she said it quickly. "They'll fall over themselves apologizing, and then move 3 things 2 inches lower and consider it solved. I've been coming to this event for 4 years. The table will be exactly the same next year." She picked up a different glass, this one filled with sparkling water, from a lower shelf she'd clearly already found on her own. "I know where the water is." He stood there for a moment, unsure if she was dismissing him or inviting him to stay. The music shifted in the background, something orchestral and forgettable. Across the room, his colleague Bernard was making aggressive eye contact, trying to wave him toward a cluster of hospital administrators. Turned his back on Bernard. "How long have you been on the board?" he asked Petra, and that was how it started. He didn't tell his daughter about her for 3 weeks. Lily was 11, at the age where she could read a room with unsettling accuracy, and Rowan had learned over the past 4 years of single parenthood that there was a specific kind of hope in children that, once raised, became almost physically painful to disappoint. Her mother, Rowan's wife Chloe, had died when Lily was 7. A cerebral hemorrhage, sudden and entirely without warning, on a Tuesday afternoon in February when Lily had been at school and Rowan had been debugging code in his home office, 2 floors above where Chloe had collapsed in the kitchen. He had never forgiven himself for not hearing it happen. He knew, rationally, that there was nothing to forgive. That even if he had been standing in the same room, there was nothing anyone could have done. The neurologist had told him that. His mother had told him that. His therapist, for the 2 years he'd managed to keep up with sessions, had told him that many times in many ways. He still slept with his bedroom door open. He still checked on Lily twice a night, every night. And he still, 4 years later, flinched every time the house went quiet in a way it shouldn't. Petra Vance did not know any of this when they had coffee for the first time at a small place on Variant Street. 6 days after the gala, she had texted him. He still wasn't sure how she'd gotten his number. He suspected Bernard, who had opinions about Rowan's social life, and asked if he wanted to talk about a potential software integration the Foundation was exploring. It was a pretext. They both knew it was a pretext, but it gave them something to hide behind while they figured out whether the other person was worth the risk of honesty. The coffee shop was accessible. Petra had clearly chosen it, deliberately, with wide aisles and a counter low enough that she could order without craning her neck. He noticed her noticing that he noticed these things, and he made a point not to comment on any of it. They talked about the software for 12 minutes. Then they talked about everything else for 2 hours. Petra had grown up in Dartmouth, the younger of 2 daughters, and had been a competitive swimmer through high school and university. She'd been working as a policy analyst for a provincial health authority when 8 years ago, she'd been in a car accident on the Trans-Canada Highway outside Truro. A transport truck had crossed the center line in a whiteout. She had been in the wrong lane to have any chance. "I was lucky," she said, and she said it like she meant it, without the brittle edge that sometimes came with those words. "The driver of the other car didn't make it. I was in hospital for 4 months. I lost function from the waist down, and then I rebuilt everything else." "The foundation work," Rowan said, "among other things." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I got impatient waiting for institutions to do better, so I started showing up to their boards and making it harder for them to ignore the gap between what they say and what they do." She paused. "It's not heroic. It's mostly just being annoying in meeting rooms. I've sat through enough meetings to know that's underrated." She smiled. It changed her face entirely, opened something up that had been carefully held in check. He drove home afterward, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, something so unfamiliar it took him most of the drive to identify it. He was looking forward to something. The second coffee became dinner. Dinner became a walk along the waterfront, which required more planning than a walk usually would. They checked accessibility on the route beforehand, and Rowan learned to match his pace to hers without making it feel like accommodation. The third time they met, he brought Lily's school schedule into the logistical conversation without quite meaning to, and Petra caught it. "You have a daughter," she said. "Lily. She's 11. You didn't mention her before. I don't mention her to most people." He paused. "She lost her mother 4 years ago. I'm careful about who comes into her orbit." Petra was quiet for a moment. They were sitting at a table near the window at a restaurant on the waterfront, and the harbor was dark and silver-gray outside. "That's fair," she said finally. "I'm careful about who comes into mine, too." He looked at her. "My accident changed me," she said. "Not in the way people expect. Not the mobility. That was its own adjustment, and it was hard, but I understood it. What I didn't expect was how it changed the way I trust people. Who's here because they care about me, and who's here because taking care of someone makes them feel like a good person." She said it carefully, like she'd thought about how to say it many times before. "Those are very different things, and it took me a long time to learn to tell the difference." "Which am I?" he asked. He said it directly, without softening it. She looked at him for a long moment. "I don't know yet. But the fact that you asked that directly, instead of getting offended by the implication, is interesting." He smiled. "I'll take interesting." They were on their 4th meeting when he told her about Chloe. Not all of it. Not the part about the kitchen, or the open bedroom door, or the way he still sometimes set 2 coffee mugs in the morning out of habit before he caught himself. But enough. Enough that she understood what he was carrying and why Lily was the axis everything else in his life rotated around. Petra listened without interrupting. When he was done, she said, "She must be remarkable. To be 11 and still standing after that." "She is," he said. "She terrifies me on a daily basis. Children should. It means you're paying attention." He told Lily about Petra on a Sunday afternoon in October, when they were making soup together. A ritual they'd developed in the first winter after Chloe died, when the house had been too quiet and Lily had needed something to do with her hands. He kept it simple. He told Lily that he'd met someone he liked, that she was someone who worked to make things better for people who had a harder time being included, and that she used a wheelchair. Lily stirred the pot and said nothing for a moment. "Is she nice?" Lily asked. "Very. Does she like soup?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I haven't asked her." Lily turned to look at him with an expression that suggested this was a significant oversight. "Dad, you have to ask her that." He promised he would. He texted Petra that evening, important question. "Do you like soup?" She replied 40 seconds later. "Depends entirely on the soup." "Why?" He told her about the Sunday ritual. She was quiet for longer than usual. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared twice before her message came through. "That sounds like something worth protecting," she wrote. "You don't have to include me in it." He sat with that for a while. Then he wrote back, "What if I want to?" The 3 dots again. Then ask me properly. Not over text, he did. The following Saturday in person, over coffee that neither of them was pretending was about software anymore. What happened next was not something any of them planned for. Rowan had been working, for the past several months, on an upgraded version of the triage software. A new module that would allow real-time coordination between ambulance dispatch and emergency departments. It was complex work, and he'd built most of it in close consultation with the Provincial Health Authority's technology office. He'd submitted the final build to their secure server in mid-November. 3 days later, he got a call from his contact at the health authority. There was a problem. The build that had been uploaded to their server wasn't the version he'd submitted. Someone had altered it, introduced a fault in the data routing logic that would, in a real emergency, cause a delay of up to 90 seconds in patient data reaching the receiving hospital. 90 seconds. He knew exactly what 90 seconds meant in a triage context. He drove to the authorities' offices and spent 6 hours with their IT security team going through access logs. The alteration had been made through a credential that belonged to a consultant who had worked briefly on the project the previous spring. A man named Aldous Fenn, who had left the contract early after a dispute over billing. Rowan had flagged concerns about Fenn during the project. He'd been overruled by a senior administrator who'd wanted to keep the project timeline intact. The same administrator who had since moved to a competing health tech firm, one that would benefit considerably if Rowan's software failed its compliance review and the contract went to tender again. He could not prove this. Not yet. What he could do was prove the alteration. He had version control records, time-stamped backups, and a cryptographic signature on the original build that could not have been replicated by anyone who didn't have access to his private key, which no one else had. The process of documenting everything, of working with the authorities' legal team and eventually the RCMP's cybercrime unit, took 11 weeks. Rowan barely slept. Lily, being Lily, noticed. She started leaving glasses of water on his desk in the evenings without being asked, a small and precise act of care that undid him every single time. Petra, during those 11 weeks, showed up in a way he hadn't expected. She didn't push for details when he couldn't share them. She didn't fill the silences with reassurance that everything would be fine. Because she didn't know that. And she was not a person who said things she didn't mean. What she did was sit with him, sometimes literally, the two of them on his back porch, in the November dark, her, with tea and him with coffee, talking about other things when he needed to talk about other things, and sitting quietly when he needed that instead. She had, he realized, an extraordinary capacity for presence without pressure. He thought it probably came from years of learning which kinds of help were real, and which were performances. He asked her about it once. She thought about it for a while. "When you spend time in a hospital," she said, "you learn pretty quickly that the people who are most useful are not the ones who are most upset on your behalf. They're the ones who show up, do the practical thing, and don't need you to reassure them that you're going to be okay." She glanced sideways at him. "You're like that with Lily. I noticed it the first time I saw the two of you together. You don't catastrophize in front of her. You just stay close. I learned it the hard way," he said. "Most people learn everything useful the hard way," she said. "That's not a flaw." The investigation concluded in late January. Fenn was charged. The senior administrator who'd hired him resigned from his new position, pending a separate internal review. The software build was restored, verified, and reinstated in the system. Rowan sat in his car outside the RCMP detachment after giving his final statement and felt nothing for a long moment. Just a deep, still quiet like the moment after a storm when the air is changed but hasn't settled yet. He called Petra. "It's done," he said. "Come over," she said. "I'll make coffee." Her apartment was on the 14th floor of a building in the South End, accessible throughout, with wide doorways and a kitchen that had been adapted so that she could reach everything she needed without asking for help. The first time he'd seen it, he'd thought that it told him more about her than anything she'd said. The deliberateness of it, the refusal to arrange her life around limitation, the fact that she'd chosen a high floor for the view, even when it would have been logistically easier not to. He sat at her kitchen counter while she made coffee and told her everything. The parts he hadn't been able to share before. The administrator. The competing firm. The specific nature of what could have gone wrong if no one had caught the alteration. She listened. When he was done, she set a mug in front of him and said, "You caught it." "I got lucky," he said. "I was doing a routine integrity check." "You built a system that had routine integrity checks," she said. "That's not luck. That's how you work." He drank his coffee. Outside the window, Halifax Harbor was visible below, dark and broad under a January sky. "I want to tell Lily about all of this," he said. "Not the details, but that it's over, and that the reason it happened was because someone wanted to take something from people who needed it." "She'll understand," Petra said. "She's your daughter." He looked at her across the counter. "I also want to ask you something." She held his gaze. "All right. I'd like you to come to Sunday soup. Properly, not as someone I'm testing the idea of, as someone who's actually there." He paused. "Lily asked me last week if you'd said yes yet. I told her I hadn't asked properly. She looked at me like I was hopeless." Petra was quiet for a moment. He could see her thinking. Not stalling, but actually considering it, the way she considered everything, carefully without performing the consideration. "Soup on Sundays," she said. "And whatever else comes after that," he said, "at whatever pace makes sense." She nodded slowly. "I should tell you something first." "Okay. I started coming to the Foundation Gala for the first time 3 years ago, specifically, because I'd heard the health authority was piloting new triage software, and I wanted to get in front of whoever built it to raise the accessibility gaps in the design." She kept her eyes on his. "I had an agenda. I got there and you weren't in the room. And then the following year I came back and you still weren't there. And this year you were. And then you handed me a glass of champagne I didn't want." He took this in. "I thought you knew who I was," he said. "I did. I'd read your work." She tilted her head slightly. "What I didn't expect was everything else. What did you expect?" "Someone who knew they were in the right and wanted credit for it." She paused. "Not someone who handed me champagne and then took it back without making it a moment." He was quiet for a while. The harbor glittered faintly below them. "The software has accessible design in the next version," he said. "I've been building it in since November." "I know," she said. "Bernard told me. Bernard tells everyone everything. It's a gift," she said, with the small, open smile that still, after all this time, caught him off guard. The first Sunday Petra came for soup, Lily spent the first 20 minutes performing elaborate normalcy, setting the table with excessive precision, asking twice whether Petra preferred the spoon on the left or the right, treating the whole event with the energy of someone who had not been asking about it for 3 weeks. Petra, to her credit, matched the energy exactly. She complimented the spoon placement without irony. She asked Lily what kind of soup it was, and listened to the full explanation, which involved the origin story of the recipe, a brief detour into Lily's opinion on bay leaves as an ingredient, and a description of the one time Rowan had added too much pepper, and the resulting diplomatic incident. "He still maintains it was the right call," Lily said, with theatrical gravity. "It was the right call," Rowan said from the stove. Petra looked between the two of them. "I'm not taking a side on this. I've known you for 4 months. I'm not ready for that level of commitment." Lily laughed, a real one, unguarded. Rowan heard it from across the kitchen and felt something that had been braced against itself for a very long time begin, slowly, to ease. After dinner, Lily retreated to do homework, and Rowan and Petra sat at the kitchen table with the leftover quiet of a shared meal. Outside, the February dark had settled in, and snow was beginning to come down over the neighborhood in slow, indifferent flakes. "She's exactly what you said," Petra said. "Remarkable." "She's her mother's," he said. Then, because it was true, and mine. Petra reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Not a dramatic gesture, just a hand, resting on his in the ordinary warmth of a kitchen after dinner. "Same time next week?" she asked. He turned his hand over beneath hers. Same time next week. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet and without urgency, the way good things sometimes arrive. Not in a moment you can point to later and call the beginning, but gradually and then all at once, in the middle of a life that had never stopped moving forward, even when it didn't know where it was going.